Hi, I'm Rachel. I am a mum to a 4-year-old Paige. We live in Belfast. I have struggled with my mental health a lot since my teenage years, and when I had Paige, it flared up my PTSD, and that really brought all my traumas to life, and I've been recovering from that ever since. I first noticed things weren't right. I went to pick Paige up from the women's centre one day, and I was just feeling really, really down. From I'd had her though, I had all these anxieties, constant worries of somebody was going to hurt her. That's what it was. Somebody was going to hurt her when I wasn't there. She wasn't allowed out of my sight at all. So I went to pick her up from the women's centre one day, and I think they told me to ask me how I was, or told me I looked nice or something, and I just fell apart. So I was just ushered away into the office to just kind of breathe and given space to talk to them. And it all came pouring out. Well, most of it came pouring out, not the real deep root of the problems, but just that I was having all these anxieties, that my mind was really playing against me, and I was really struggling with wanting to live anymore. I felt like I was going crazy and I couldn't control anything, and I was absolutely convinced somebody was going to hurt Paige. And that was the most terrifying thing, I think. So they signed me up for counselling, and when I went to counselling, I think I spent the first 3 or 4 sessions just going through, I feel like a bad mum, I can't cope most days, I'm crying all the time, and working through lots of things like that. And then on the 5th session, I opened up and told her about a horrible trauma of rape that had happened in Magaluf. And so that would have been my session before my last session. We agreed to extend the sessions, and on my last session, it all came pouring out that I had been abused whenever I was 14 years old. And she was the first person I had ever told. And it felt like my world was coming crashing down around me. But she helped me to see that trauma is where my anxieties were coming from with Paige. I still don't know if they've ever settled. Do you know? I think it's settled now that she can tell me. She has a voice, whereas when she was a little baby, I think if I had to go through that stage with an infant again, it would be all over. I feel like I've recovered, but I still think it would all kick back in. I'm just very aware of that now. So yes, I started to reach out for support through my local women's centre. I started to attend their groups and their classes, and my counsellor talked me into going to see the GP, although I was breastfeeding at the time, and it was, here are tablets, and I was so anxious about the health risks of these tablets and what would happen through my breast milk. I didn't trust them at all, which is terrible. But I said no, and I'll just stick with my counselling. And so my main source of support was my local women's centre, and all the courses that they run through that. I went out and I made my own village. So it was just me and my baby at that point. And after about 6 months to a year, we finally had some support around us, and that felt great. When I reached out to my GP, I don't really feel like I got the support that I needed. I was already in counselling, so they kind of bypassed that. They didn't offer me any further counselling. I told the GP about my trauma too, and what had happened in the past, and they didn't flag that, maybe with specialist care. They were quite happy for me to go and continue to do that all myself. And I feel like all the support was through myself, and if I didn't go out and ask for it, I didn't get it. I was never really talked through options with medication. I was never reassured with the medication, so I just battled on until I was in a real dire state, maybe a year or so later, and I had finished breastfeeding. The biggest impact on my mental health was probably my pregnancy. It was very, very stressful, and it definitely put me into that state of fight or flight, and I feel like I've been maybe in that state of fighting for 14 years before that. So whenever I had Paige, I was very, very worried about somebody hurting her, and that was really the biggest impact. It set off my anxieties. It was nearly, I was playing scenarios, horrible scenarios in my head that I just didn't want to be there. They were really intrusive thoughts, and it was about people that I love, and it was people that I trust, but I didn't trust anybody with her, and that really, really had a big impact on my mental health. I found it really hard to reach out to friends and family for support because I had never told anybody about that trauma. And until January of this year, I still hadn't told any of my family about that trauma. And now they all know, and they're all very supportive. It all went really well compared to what I think it was going to. And I now know I should have reached out for support back then. I think there's a lot of information out there about perinatal mental health issues, but I don't think the support is really there. I feel like you have to go out and you really have to find it for yourself. Whereas a GP is happy just to brush you off mainly, especially at the start with just antidepressants and see how you go. And that doesn't get to the root cause of the problem. And I think in my case with my perinatal mental health issues, there was a real big root cause there, and I wasn't going to recover from those health issues until it was addressed. I feel like I was let down in a way that I know that I had never told anybody about my trauma, but there was absolutely no mention of postnatal PTSD. I was told about postnatal anxiety, depression, postnatal psychosis, but nobody mentioned it can trigger PTSD. And I feel like that's something that really needs to look into, because birth in itself is very traumatic, and even if it's not connected to your previous trauma, can still set off those worries and those anxieties and stuff again. And I feel like maybe even at a consultation appointment before, if you're given that chance to talk about your worries and things, your appointments and stuff are very all centred around your baby and your health and how is baby doing. And I was a shell of a woman. Like I was so ill my whole pregnancy, and even that was brushed off, never mind the mental health issues. And I think at that point in pregnancy, your mental health should already be being addressed there, and just making sure that you stay on a nice level and you're stable throughout. If I had to say anything to parents that are going through what I went through, is to reach out. You could get through it on your own, but it's much easier to do it when you have a team of people supporting you. Just find your voice, and just, even if it's a little squeak to start with, just ask for help. Every little step is a step in the right direction. And I just I have so many things I'd love to say to people. Don't be afraid to open up and tell somebody you're struggling. Being a parent is the hardest job in the world, and we all struggle through it. I think it's important that parents get the right help at the right time, because that moment of intervention is so important and so critical, and if it's too late, it can be really hard to recover from. Whereas if you get it at a stage where you still have a little bit of hope and a little bit of strength, it's much easier to recover from when you're in that darkness entirely. My local community has helped me the most. My local charities. Windsor Women's Centre has been the major role in my recovery, and since finding me our pangs and all the opportunities I've had since becoming a peer supporter has really helped me make sense of my own mental health too. And it's made me feel much stronger. It's made me feel a whole lot less crazy. And having that community support behind me that I can fall back on when things are starting to feel like they're falling apart again is just amazing. It just gives you that extra strength and that extra hope that you need on a really bad day. And sometimes a wee hug is all you need too. Just I feel like I was really let down by the GP. I feel like I cried out for help a lot, and there could have been a lot more done there than there was done. I feel like I should have been taken more seriously rather than just take these tablets, see how you feel. Nobody ever checked in with me after I started taking those tablets. I was just left to phone them back if I needed to. And when you're in those dire moments, you don't always want to. You feel like you're a burden. You feel like you're making mountains out of molehills, and you feel like you're attention seeking, and you feel all those bad things that people attach to the stigma of mental health. Whereas now I know that I should have put my foot down and really told them that I needed this help and asked for it, rather than just waiting for them to offer it to me. I really do think that they should be more thorough with a mental health check, especially in the perinatal stage. I feel like mums hold back a lot because we're very scared of our children being taken away. And yeah, it's my life is good now. I'm much more stable. I am very aware of my mental health, which helps. So I'm not going to say every day is good, because there are some really bad, dark days still, but I have the strength to get through them now, and I have that amazing support behind me that helps me get through those days. I feel strong enough now that I can reach out and ask for help before it gets to any of those really dark moments again, or if I feel those really dark moments creeping up, that I can fight them too.